Hello and welcome back to our Inside Number Nine series. It's been a couple months now, I think, since the last episode. That's flown by. It really feels like just a week ago we were talking about series three, but we're back with. I did say I wasn't going to differentiate that season four, which is I agree. That's what makes sense, but that's not how British TV shows. It's a whole thing. I'm joined again by Andrew, as always. Thank you again for joining me. It's fun to be back.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me, as always.
And if you've this is your first episode watching, where have you been? This is a half-hour episode anthology series from the UK on the BBC. We have ranked the episodes from series one to three already. We are now at season four. And let's just get straight into it because I'm really excited to break this one down. Andrew is going to go first this time with his number six. There will be mild spoilers, and if we're going to go into big spoilers, I'm sure one of us will make a note of that.
Yeah, I usually try to thread the needle in terms of how much to say on these, but guess we'll kick it off. So, yeah, overall, I'd say this season was probably on the stronger side of what we've discussed so far, but we'll see why as we go through it. So, my number six, file this under probably the lower stakes category of Inside Number Nine episodes. Um, that's And the Winner Is. Which I probably still have at about like a 6 out of 10. So that's probably one of the highest floors I've had for any of these. I usually find myself starting with like the lower rated episodes, and often wind up enjoying them. This isn't really an exception to that. I liked it. Has some nice structure to it with like the jury over voting for the uh, best actress. Um, Very simple. A bunch of like movie industry personalities gather to vote um, on this. They all have their own insecurities that start to poke through in the deliberations as to who they're going to pick. Think 12 Angry Men, but way more light and inconsequential. The twist, like the episode, I don't think is anything huge, but it was fitting. Uh, Possibly decent to show to someone who wants something maybe a little bit less wacky or dark as an entry point to the show. Um, yeah, it's mainly here just because I'd say overall it just doesn't have the extra punch that maybe some of the other episodes we'll be talking about offer. So that's my number six.
It's also my number six. You can't really put anything else at the bottom for this season because every other episode has a lot more going on. I've got it as a 7 out of 10. And this is very often placed as like one of the worst episodes that they ever did. In fact, it's ranked 52 of 55 on IMDb, so pretty much near the bottom. I think that's pretty harsh. And I also think it serves a really important purpose within the season because, as we'll get to, you get, I think it's three episodes, or at least two, episode two and four are very intense, very intense. Um, and you kind of need that sort of lighter episode to just break it up a bit, just so it doesn't become painful to watch. And so for that reason, I think it's very important. It is also, I think, suffers from being part of what I would call the strongest season of Inside Number Nine that they ever did. I guess the show's finished now, but um, I do really love Zoe Wanamaker usually, but her American accent here is oh, it's not great. Um, but I'm not sure if they were going for like a British actress who's moved to America and is pretending to be American type thing, because that's kind of how it came across. Because that does happen. Um, I really don't have much to say. Like I agree with you. I just want to talk about the other episodes. So it's a seven. It's watchable. It's entertaining. It's light. It's important within the season, even though it's an anthology show. I feel like that still matters, having that sort of breather episode. So yeah, it's all right.
All right. Matching so far. I'm not sure how much that's going to continue because there's a lot of ways we can go from here. My number five, I'm not sure. Maybe this is a controversial second to last one here. I have Bernie Clifton's dressing room. I had a feeling that might be a painful one for you, but let me share my thoughts and we'll see how we feel about it after. To an extent, I think this might be the type of episode I have a lot more respect for than I that is like totally in my wheelhouse. What this episode does really well is carefully build a history between two characters, a former sketch comedy duo revisiting like after decades apart, and some unfinished business regarding how that partnership fell apart. Um, it also touches on themes of like how performing in this sphere has changed over time. So that's very interesting. As usual, there's always more to the story, which is hard to get into too much without spoiling. Um, but this one winds up doubling down on like the character sides of things. And so if you're like a character centered, like looking for that in this show, you definitely want to check out this episode. I tend to be more of like a plot person, so that might be kind of where we might end up differing on that. Um, I wound up really liking the more stoic Thomas character as the story unfolds. It's obviously important for there to be like more than meets the eye for the payoff. I guess the main thing holding it back again is just not anything the episode does wrong, so much as tending to enjoy these more plot centered stories that we have to come. And while there are some universal themes you can mine from it, I would say it's a little bit further removed from like relatability. I don't have a history as a sketch comedy duo or like show business in terms of like being in front of a camera and stuff like that. So you're kind of looking at it from an outsider point of view as opposed to putting yourself in their shoes for me. So that's where I land on that. I have a feeling you're not going to be talking about this one for a while, but I have this as like a strong seven.
My number five is Bernie. No, it's not. Of course, it's not. My number five, which admittedly is probably equally controversial to some people. Zanzibar, the first episode of the season. But I have this as an 8 out of 10, which is we're already at like great episodes. It's ranked 14th out of 55 on IMDb. But more than any other episode of the show, I think this is a real Marmite episode, as you'd call it. You know, some people really hate it because it is so flowery and intricate. And if we're going to get into it, it's all sort of like Shakespearean dialogue, a lot of rhyming dialogue, a lot of like wink to camera, um, you know, farcical screwball comedy. Um, And it's all set in this sort of hotel, the ninth floor of this hotel. And you have all these different types of characters. And a lot of people think it's the greatest episode that they ever did. I wouldn't go that far. It's a classic, fence sitting when there's extreme opinions. I think it's great, but, I also think that some of the stronger positive opinions are a bit much for me. Although I do think this is one of the better ensemble casts the show has ever assembled. I mean, Rory Kinnear in two roles is fantastic. As a big Fleabag fan, it was great to see Bill Patterson and his continuing attempts to do something being interrupted. I don't want to reveal what it is, but it's that sort of like dark contrast with the tone of the episode is really, really effective. And you watch this episode, it makes so much sense that they eventually took Inside Number Nine to the stage, and that was something that they did once the show ended. They did a stage show run recently. I think my highlight moment was Reece Shearsmith's character, when at the end he does a very unhinged hokey cokey, which really made me laugh because it just, yeah, that his whole character was just ridiculous. It's really twisty and turny, pretty creative. I don't, I've never really like connected to it on like an emotional level or like found it really mind blowing or amazing like a lot of people have, but I think it's really cool and really fun, and I think it suffers for being in this season. Really, is my only note, but it's really good.
Nice. So I feel like this is going to be a little bit less of a hot take for my next one. Number four, Tempting Fate. Kind of like the usually what's reserved for the horror kind of story. Um, and this one, it kind of is like that. It's like a Twilight Zone type uh, story. I also have it at a 7 out of 10, but again, we're almost teetering into 8, but I'll get into why. So, three contractors tasked with cleaning up like this hoarder's home discover a bronze hair, which I didn't find out until afterwards that that's the thing that shows up in every episode somewhere. But here it's used like as like the centerpiece, like a monkey's paw. Um, it's a fairly familiar, like be careful what you wish for anthology premise. I think if you're doing an anthology, it's going to probably show up somewhere, and here it is. Basically, the three wishes, but there's always a catch. The setting made it a bit different, and I think stories like this always make for an easy watch. I do think there have been better, more definitive versions of this type of story made before. It does its job, but it's probably isn't like so mind blowing to be a classic of the series either for me. Um, but maybe that's coming from the background of having seen those other uh, attempts to do that kind of story before, and so it's presenting less new, knowing that I have seen those. But again, I really liked the episode, um, and I'm a horror guy, so I always like that little twist of like supernatural in there. But um, yeah, I still think there's better to come in this season. So yeah, I'm curious to see what your thoughts are going to be on that one.
Well, you'll hear about them right now. It's my number four. Um, I'm going straight up to a nine. This is like I would say call this an 8.5 though. It's like I couldn't really decide, and I settled for a nine. It's ranked 25th out of 55 on IMDb out of the whole show. It would be my vote. I've sort of mentioned that every season has that underrated episode, and I think this is the one because no one ever really talks about this one. And I think that is largely because you've seen the monkey's paw done before. Um, it's definitely not quite as good as the Simpsons take on it, but it's not far off. Um, yeah, and I keep saying that each horror episode has been better than the last. The first season's one was quite weak, and then each one has been better and better, and I think that's carried on here. Um, the atmosphere is palpable. It's a solid premise in a great location. I had also written down that it's funny that the Easter egg hair plays a major role in the episode's plot. I think it's maybe one of only like two times that happens. I wrote down that it has, as someone who hasn't seen this show, I'll see what you think of this. In terms of tone, it's sort of like Are You Afraid of the Dark with adults? Especially like the scenes where the three of them are like sat around like talking. I could almost picture them like around a campfire. Like it's got that similar kind of cozy vibe, even though it's really like grimy and disgusting. And it was extra interesting watching this directly after binging Something Very Bad Is Going to Happen, which I think that will have come out before this. But two stories about curses, and that's it, I guess. That's where the connection ends. And I really enjoyed Nigel Planer from The Young Ones as Frank as well, right at the end. Really cool. I guess minor spoilers, but yeah, really, really, really fun ending. And I think it does have that issue that a couple of Inside Number Nine episodes have, where the ending is a bit too much of a whiplash, where like in the last 2 minutes, so much happens, and then it just has to speed along because of that half-hour runtime. But I can forgive it. It's still a really good episode. Just not quite cracking the top three.
Alrighty. Um, I'm at my top three now. So number three, you've already spoken about it, Zanzibar. Uh, this is probably my favorite of like the opening of each season, like the ensemble episodes. I'm up to 8 out of 10 for this one. They really managed to weave like a creative, intricate story out of taking place like exclusively in a hotel hallway, the ninth floor, of course. Quite an assortment of characters. You got like this pampered prince, a magician, couple on the cusp of a proposal, dementia-stricken elderly woman and or yeah, elderly woman and her son, and then the old man who's suicidal, and he's part of the big reveal later. Um, Everyone has their own story going on. We're bouncing around. Lots of shenanigans takes place between like room swaps, twins separated at birth, misunderstandings, all that kind of fun stuff. Things do wind up wrapping in a neat little bow, which I think is probably appropriate enough given how awry things go along the way. Maybe it doesn't carry the closing wallop we've come to expect in some of these episodes. Um, the other aspect that probably holds it back from being like a top tier episode, like among my favorites, is more of a personal grievance, and that's the decision to make most of the dialogue rhyme. Must have taken a lot of work, and it's impressive, but it's also a little cutesy for me, I suppose. Probably just gravitate toward like the more like naturalistic dialogue, since the story I think would work just as well without that. But they were trying something, and it's really well put together episode. So that's my number three.
My number three, again, this might, I don't know. I love all these like top ones, so I don't know how we can be controversial really. But my number three is Once Removed, which I still have as a 9 out of 10. It is ranked fourth out of 55 on IMDb, one of the most revered episodes of the entire show. It's basically the British answer to Memento. Um, uh, you open with Nick Moran of Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels fame. Um, it's kind of a fun cameo. And then you have this like absurd opening, and then you just go back 10 minutes at a time to see where it all starts. And to be fair, it's really cool how you would think that would make for quite a predictable story, but they put the twist of the story at the beginning of the story so that it's at the end of the episode. So really well put together in that sense. I've written down I love an episode where both Reese and Steve have elaborate wigs. That's always good. Um, and I also always like sloppy criminal stories. That's always I find really entertaining. Um, I find that the structure really does benefit the story, and sort of much like Memento, if you watched it chronologically, it'd probably be quite boring, or at least more boring. Um, uh, I have one massive nitpick with this. Um, there's the scene, I guess, minus spoilers. There's a scene towards the end where one character has recorded another character and then starts playing the recordings over the phone, like instantly after making it. Like, when did she edit those? Like, is she just like pausing and then rewinding to the perfect spot? It's so contrived. And it's like, oh, we got 5 minutes left. We need to find a way to end the episode. It's that one detail really annoys me, and I think that's dragged it from being number two to number three. Um, because it's it is a nitpick, but also like it's so stupid. It's clearly people who don't use mobile phones very much, or like that kind of audio editing technology. Maybe that's just me, but I actually think this is one of the episodes that could have benefited from being a bit longer as well. I could have easily watched 45 minutes of this. All that aside, yeah, really great. I think maybe it does lack in the character department, but it really makes up for it in the excitement and plot and rewatchability and entertainment. And I mean, especially with my top two episodes, really great musical score throughout all of these episodes this season. I felt the score was really a lot noticeably better, and it was really good in this episode. But yeah, number three, Once Removed, I really like it.
I hear you about that tape recorder thing. I feel like it's not the first time I've seen that used in movies and television before too, and it always bugs me. It's just one of those things you just got to roll with, I guess. But yeah, but I'll speak about that now because that's my number two. Once Removed, playing around the structure here on this one. I'm sticking with an 8 out of 10 here. As you said, little like Memento style, beginning with the ending, revealing the story in reverse chronological order. There's a lot of attention to detail here, aside from that one that you mentioned, whether it's the placement of objects having consequences, the various motives that we don't know until later. mistaken identity, of course, having a recurring theme throughout. The general idea is that like a house is for sale, the owner is preparing to move out for reasons we learn later. Along the way, you've got like this gregarious mover, a calculating neighbor, a father who's off his rocker, this desperate realtor, and a killer. And it all comes together really nicely. This one works so well because it's like blending their creative experimental instincts they like to try out with like a tightly plotted thriller uh, as well. So the cherry on top is the final detail of the story, which I wouldn't dare spoil, but I think might be the best use of the show's title. I guess we can say that so far in the series. Yeah, I really enjoyed this one. I think it's a really strong entry for the show. That's my number two.
Yeah, I would say it's probably the second best use of the reference to the number nine. Um, and
Right.
we're not going to get to the best reference for quite a while. So yeah, my number two is your number one to have and to hold. So our lists are exactly the same, just that one episode has just like on opposite sides of the list, which is quite funny. I'm still at a number nine, a 9 out of 10 on this one. And this is ranked 17th of 55 on IMDb. I think it's a similar story to Zanzibar here, where a lot of people rank this as the best, but there is something so deeply uncomfortable about this episode that I think a lot of people think it's a bit too much as well. So it's another quite divisive one. I remember the first time I watched it, I kind of hated it halfway through until you get the twist, and then it's like, oh my God. And then I find that from that point on, it's like positively electrifying. It's like one of the most intense episodes of the show. So I guess it is sort of uncomfortable in two very different ways, right? Like the first half of the episode is uncomfortable in a certain way, pure sort of cringe. And then
Mm-hmm.
the second half, in terms of all that, because, you know, it's hard to really talk about it without talking about the twist. I think it's definitely the biggest slow burn in the entire series. Um, it's sort of it's I find it really interesting because it's an episode where when I think about it, I think, oh, I don't really want to rewatch that one. But then when you do rewatch, you're like, oh, this is just brilliant. You know, it's kind of that kind of vibe. Um, it's sort of like a starkly uncomfortable examination of like later years marriages and like all that kind of stuff. Again, the musical score is fantastic in this episode. Really good, really diverse. I think my main takeaway here is that Steve Pemberton, given the right role, could win an Oscar. He's so good and so can just fill in any role, really. Um, and this role, he just switches halfway through, and it is incredible. I really think this is them at the peak of their powers in terms of writing. And I think the only reason it doesn't get to a 10 for me is just because I can't. It's not one I want to rewatch. Whereas my tens are like, oh, I'd love to put that on again and experience it again. I do want to mention a spoiler here because I have to because it's a detail that I kind of not missed but kind of took for granted. Is that there's the reveal at the very end? Spoilers, 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 spoilers. That the people that Adrian has been keeping in his room are now like living with Adrian's ex-wife, and Adrian's now in the room. The thing I kind of they just kind of gloss over it is that, oh yeah, we were there for 9 years, and I was like looking at this kid and I'm like, how old's that kid? Like 7, 8 or older? So either he is like, I assume, assaulted this woman and she's given birth to this child, or there was a baby in there with her the whole time. And like that's not spelt out, that's not like lingered on. But that like just little throwaway line, we were there for 9 years. I was just like, oh my God, that makes it so much more dark. Um, and I hadn't really thought about it before now because the kid is in it for like two scenes, two like literally 30 seconds right at the end. And I guess the first time around I was already reeling from the main twist. It's a Titanic episode of TV, and I think everyone should watch it at least once just to experience the craziness of it.
Yeah. Um, as you said, it's my number one. I'm not sure if I'm going high eight, low nine. My eights are your nines essentially, I find. Anyways, we'll go with a high eight for now, and we'll see it when we're doing like a series ranking where the chips fall. But it's definitely my favorite of this season. You said a lot of great points about it already. You think you're settling into one kind of story, and then all of a sudden you're in a completely different one. For the first stretch, anyways, it seems like we're dealing with this story of like this marriage that's just barely hanging on. The husband, a dull wedding photographer, consumed with his work, and the wife who feels neglected, attempts to renew the spark, um, but also some history that complicates things for them. And then the reveal happens. You mentioned it already. It's one I didn't want to spoil because I thought it was very effective. But assuming someone watching this video has circled around and somehow missed it, I'll just say it was a very effective, definitely on the disturbing end, even for this show. Um, and I just thought it was a great episode, boosted by its turning point. Because as you said, if you're just taking the first half on its own, I don't know what you can really make of it as an episode. It really requires that hard shift into what it becomes. It's probably one of those ones that I think if someone does watch it, they should probably watch it a second time at some point. I want to at some point just to see what I may have not picked up on the first time earlier on, or just how that recontextualizes it. Because midway through it just flips it on its head. And I guess on a lighter note, as an aside, I really got a kick out of the Reese Shearsmith character in this one, who, along with his wife, they just kind of pop in as like these innocent bystanders to whatever else is going on. So that was a little moment of comedy in what is a super dark episode. Um, but yeah, that is my number one for series season 4.
You did it then. You're not even British. Um, yeah, I mean, my number one's Bernie Clifton's dressing room. My heart is in pieces. No, it's fine. You made really good points, and I totally get it. This is a 10 out of 10. It is ranked number 7 out of 55 on IMDb. I can't commit yet because I want to think about it before we do the list at the end, but I think this is my favorite episode of the show. And I think it's one of the finest episodes of television I've ever seen. But that comes with the caveat of I've also seen The League of Gentlemen and I've been watching Reese and Steve's work for years. So the sort of meta facing mortality examination of their friendship and partnership that this is probably makes it hit home even more for me rather than somebody who's watching the show for the first time now, right? And this is the only thing of theirs that they've seen. So that's definitely an aspect. While I can't say that like show business is something that I have a massive like connection to, there are other aspects of the episode's content that really hit home with me, and make it a pretty tough watch. Um, and I also just think the performances here from both of them are just absolutely incredible. I think it's the only episode. I know there's a brief cameo at the end, but it's at least one of the only episodes where it's mainly just the two of them. Um, and they are just fantastic. Steve Pemberton has this like quiet tragedy, and he has so much pain in his eyes. It is so good. The score is amazing. Um, And I think, honestly, on top of all the tragedy, I do think it's funny. I think the brown bottles bit is, it makes me laugh. I think it's funny. Um, and the confrontation between the two of them near the end is just heartbreaking. And I wouldn't say it's the most unpredictable twist, but when you get that final musical number, every time I watch it, I tear up. It is just so beautiful. And when you have that much emotionality and that the writing is that strong, a predictable twist is fine by me. And I'm not one to cry watching things ever, really. It's really like Interstellar, Toy Story 3, and Bernie Clifton's dressing room. That's it. Like, um, but every time I watch it, and I've seen it about 6 or 7 times now, it is it's special. And it's like I said, that meta aspect, I think definitely, and my personal connection to some of the stuff that it's getting into. But man, yeah, just amazing. But again, it makes sense having thought about it now with your taste, especially within this season, that there's more sort of thriller, faster paced episodes that would be more to your taste. So that makes sense. I can accept it.
The one thing I will say though is I think it's also the kind of work where if you were re-engaging with it, having accumulated certain life experiences or that might, connect to what's happening in this episode, the emotional payoff would only get stronger.
Yeah, for sure. And Tears of Laughter is just a brilliant song. It is whew, it is a heavy one, but it's great. Um, and
You
yeah,
know,
I
I
guess I
had a,
guess
I had a feeling going in
mm,
to this season that we were going to differ a lot on this episode. I had a feeling it was going to be very highly regarded for you.
yeah. Well, your gut feeling was right. Um, and I think a lot of people would agree, but I think it's one of those seasons where a lot of people have different number ones. I think a lot of people would have Once Removed, a lot of people would have Zanzibar. It just depends on your taste. Um, and you had To Have and To Hold, so that's cool.
Yeah. And I would say overall, like as a season, I still place it like on the stronger side of what we've had so far. Maybe the strongest. Like in some ways, like I have had higher highs that we've discussed previously, but I don't think there's been a more consistent batch and a more varied batch of styles to have all in one place like this. So viewing it as a whole, it was a really strong set.
Yeah, I guess we're going into season 5 next, which is going to be interesting because I kind of view season 2 through 4 as like the golden era of Inside Number Nine. Not that it ever gets bad. There are bad episodes, but there's not like a whole season where I'm like, ah, this sucks, you know? Every season has 2 to 3 great episodes at the least for me. Season 5, it's going to be an interesting one.
So far, I don't think we've had a score below a 5, so I'm curious how low we may go.
No comment. um, Thank you very much for watching. If you haven't watched Inside Number Nine Series 4, I'd recommend you go and watch Bernie Clifton's Dressing Room and To Have and To Hold. Um, Even though To Have and To Hold's kind of been spoiled for you by now, you should have paused the video, watched the episode, and then come back. It's only half an hour long. Um, to those of you who have, I would really like to hear what your favorite episodes of Series 4 are. Andrew and I will be back next with the TV archive. I know that that's been on the back burner for a long time, but we're going to get back on it soon. And also, we'll do a separate one-off review for Deadline, the live episode. So that'll be good. Yeah, and hopefully we will catch you again soon for another episode.